There is a specific kind of person who walks into a room and doesn't try to own it, and yet somehow, debt, effort, or intention, the room reorganizes itself around them anyway. Marcus Okafor was that kind of person. I had known about him for years before I ever really saw him. He existed in my life the way background details exist in a painting present, acknowledged, but not the point. He was Jade's older brother. He was the one who'd gone to architecture school in Portland, who called their mother every Sunday without being asked, who had apparently once built an actual functioning bookshelf from reclaimed wood as a birthday gift. He was, by all accounts, a genuinely good human being. He was also, had trained myself not to think about, extraordinarily handsome. My name is Theo Vasquez. I was 27 when the story I'm about to tell you began, a junior urban planner at a city consultancy in Atlanta, a person who made excellent spreadsheets and very safe life choices, and the best friend of Jade Okafor for going on 9 years. Jade and I had met in our first week of college, bonded over a shared hatred of a particular professor's grading system, and then, more importantly, over a shared love of terrible action movies and very good ramen. She was sharp, funny, loyal, the kind of friend who remembered not just your birthday, but the things you mentioned once in passing that mattered to you. She was my person, my constant, and Marcus was her brother. He was 33 years older than me. 2 years older than Jade, and he had moved back to Atlanta 8 months ago after 6 years in Portland, returning to take a position at an architecture firm downtown following what Jade described, with sisterly vagueness, as a whole situation that I understood to mean a relationship that had ended badly and a life that needed rebuilding. He'd been back 8 months. In those 8 months, I had seen him perhaps a dozen times at Jade's apartment, at family dinners I was occasionally folded into, at a birthday party in September. Each time, we'd been perfectly pleasant, friendly, the comfortable, slightly surface-level warmth of two people who share an important person but don't quite share a world. Each time, I had gone home and told myself firmly that it was fine, that whatever I felt in his presence, that particular alertness, the sense of the room sharpening, was nothing. Background noise. Not the point. I was very good at telling myself things. What changed, as things that change always do, happened without announcement. It was a Wednesday evening in late January. Cold in the way Atlanta gets cold, not dramatically. Not with the conviction of a northern winter, but with a damp gray insistence that gets into your bones. I'd gone to Jade's apartment after work to pick up a book I'd lent her 3 months ago and finally needed back. Jade wasn't there. Marcus was. He opened the door in a gray Henley and worn jeans, a pencil tucked behind his ear, and looked at me with an expression that moved through surprise and into something warmer before settling carefully. "Into neutral, Theo," he said. "Hey." I held up my hand in a wave that I immediately felt was unnecessary, given that I was standing directly in front of him. "I left a book here. Jade said she'd leave it. She's not home? She got called in." He stepped back. "Come in." "She mentioned it. It's on the counter." I came in. I found the book on the counter. "I should have left. You want coffee?" he asked. He was already moving to the kitchen. "I just made a pot." I looked at the book. I looked at the door. I thought about the cold outside in my empty apartment and the very sensible, very safe choice of going home and eating leftover pasta alone. "Sure," I said. "Thanks." He poured 2 mugs. I sat at Jade's kitchen counter, which I had sat at 100 times, and tried to feel as comfortable as I usually did there, which was proving more difficult than usual because Marcus was leaning against the opposite counter with his coffee and looking at me with that quality of attention I hadn't quite known how to process for 8 months. He was a listener. That was part of it. Most people, when they're with you, are half somewhere else, planning their next sentence, checking something in their peripheral vision. Marcus was entirely present. When he looked at you, he was looking at you. It was I was finding quite a lot to be on the receiving end of. "How's the planning project going?" he asked. "The West Side Corridor thing." I blinked. "Jade told you about that?" "She talks about you," he said simply. "How's it going?" I told him. Not the surface version, the fine, busy, good version I gave most people, but the actual version. About the city council complications and the community, engagement issues, and the particular challenge of designing for a neighborhood that had strong opinions about what it wanted to become. He asked good questions, specific ones, not just polite ones, and I realized after a few minutes that he was drawing on his architecture background. Thinking about the physical space of what I was describing, the built environment implications. The green corridor proposal is interesting, he said. But you're going to run into light tan shadow issues in the winter if the buildings on the east side stay at current height. Has anyone modeled that? Not yet, I said. I stopped. That's a gap I've been trying to articulate for 2 weeks. He shrugged, but his eyes were warm. A fresh set of eyes, or an architect's eyes. Same thing, sometimes. I laughed. He smiled. Outside, the cold pressed against the windows, and the kitchen was warm. And I stayed for an hour and a half and drove home in the dark, feeling like something in the atmosphere had shifted. Though I couldn't have told you precisely what or how February arrived. Then March. I saw Marcus more often, not by design or not entirely. Jade's apartment remained our shared hub, and Marcus was there more frequently than he'd been in the fall. When he'd been in the grinding adjustment period of a new job and a new city relearned, he was settling, finding his rhythm. He'd joined a basketball league with some guys from his office. He was restoring a vintage drafting table he'd found at an estate sale. He'd started cooking elaborate Sunday dinners for himself and Jade and whoever happened to be around. I happened to be around. Increasingly, the three of us had a dynamic that was easy in a way I hadn't expected. Jade at the center, Marcus and I on either side, a triangle with comfortable angles. We watched bad movies. We argued about Atlanta's urban development in a way that was more fun than it had any right to be. We played a card game that Marcus had invented with his college roommates. That had rules I never fully understood but always ended up enjoying, and Marcus kept looking at me. That's the only way I know how to describe it. It wasn't staring, nothing so obvious. It was more that when I spoke, his attention came to me fully and stayed. When I laughed at something, his eyes found me a half second before anyone else's. When I was in the room, I had the consistent, quiet sensation of being seen. Jade noticed. Because Jade noticed everything. She didn't say anything directly, that wasn't her style. The direct frontal approach, but I caught her twice. Watching the two of us with an expression that was thoughtful in a way that made me nervous. When I caught her eye, she'd move on immediately, change the subject. Act as though she'd been looking at something else entirely. She was, I knew, thinking. I was also thinking. Which was the problem? The specific problem was this. Marcus Okafor was Jade's brother. He had been through, by her account, a difficult end to a serious relationship. He was rebuilding. He was also, as far as I knew, straight, though Jade had never actually said so explicitly. And I realized, turning this over one night when I couldn't sleep, that I'd assumed it without foundation, which was either a protective mechanism or a failure of imagination. Either way, the arithmetic of the situation remained complicated. He was my best friend's brother. Whatever I felt, whatever this was, had a clear, clean reason to stay unfelt. Jade's friendship was irreplaceable. Her family was, by extension, something I held carefully. I was not going to introduce chaos into the most important relationship in my life because I couldn't manage my own reactions to a man who asked good questions and made good coffee and looked at me like I was worth looking at. I was a person who made excellent spreadsheets and very safe life choices. I chose, again, safety. The Saturday in April that everything became harder to ignore started the way many of my Saturdays did. At Jade's kitchen table. Coffee, her telling me something I wasn't prepared for. Marcus had gone to his basketball thing. It was just the two of us. The morning light slanted across the table. And Jade wrapped her hands around her mug and looked at me the way she looked at things she'd been thinking about for a while. "Can I ask you something?" She said. "You always ask if you can ask," I said. "You never actually wait for the answer. That's fair." She smiled briefly. "Then, Are you interested in Marcus? The coffee mug in my hands became very important to look at. Jade, I'm not upset, she said quickly, clearly meaning it. I want you to know that first. I'm not asking because I'm worried or warning you off. I'm asking because I'm your best friend. I've been watching you two for 2 months and I want to actually know what's happening. I set the mug down. Nothing is happening. That wasn't the question. I looked at her. She looked back, steady, patient, safe. 9 years of being the person who told me the truth, even when I didn't want it. I don't know, I said, which was not honest. He stopped. Started again. I don't let myself think about it. There are about 15 good reasons not to. Name one. He's your brother. That's one. She waited. He's been through something hard. He's rebuilding. Getting involved with someone is probably the last thing he needs. He's 30 years old, Theo. He gets to decide what he needs. I don't know what he's looking for. Or what he's... I paused. I don't know what I am to him.
Ow.
Jade was quiet for a moment. She looked at her coffee. He asks about you, she said. When you're not here? Not in a casual way. She tilted her head. He asked me once what you were like in college. What you were like when things were hard. He was asking like someone who wanted to know you more than they currently do. I felt something in my chest that I immediately tried to classify as something other than hope. Jade, I looked at her. What are you telling me? I'm telling you that you're my best friend, she said. And Marcus is my brother. And I love you both, which means I want you both to be happy, and I'm smart enough to know that sometimes the people we keep at arm's length are exactly the people we should let in. I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you that if something is there, the fact that he's my brother isn't an obstacle from my end. Okay, that's what I wanted to say. I sat with that for a long moment. And if it went badly, I said, we'd figure it out. She met my eyes. Theo, you've been my best friend for 9 years. A hypothetical future complication is not more important than what's actually right now in front of you. I looked out the window. Atlanta in April, starting to bloom, the light turning that particular warm gold that makes the city look like a postcard of itself. I don't know what's in front of me. I said, yes, you do, said Jade. You're just scared. She wasn't wrong. I didn't do anything with what Jade had said. I held it the way I held things I wasn't ready to act on carefully, at a slight distance, taking it out occasionally to look at it and then putting it back. But something had shifted, subtly. The next time I was around Marcus, I was less deliberate about keeping the careful edges in place. I let the conversation go longer. I asked questions of my own. I stopped monitoring myself quite so relentlessly, and he responded to that. It was like he'd been waiting for some kind of permission, some signal that it was all right to come a little closer, and the moment I stopped guarding so hard, he moved toward the space I'd made. The drafting table became the occasion. He'd mentioned it once. Weeks ago, the vintage one he was restoring. A 1960s Hamilton drafting table he'd found at an estate sale outside the city. I'd asked how the restoration was going, and he'd said he was mostly done, and I'd said, I'd like to see it sometime. And I'd said it the way you say things sometimes without fully meaning to. He texted me on a Thursday afternoon. Table's done. If you wanted to see it, no pressure. I looked at the text for longer than was dignified. Then I texted back, Saturday work. Saturday works, he said. His apartment was on the east side of the city. A converted warehouse unit that suited him completely. All exposed brick and high ceilings and natural light. The kind of space that had been designed by someone who understood how light moved through a room. The drafting table was in the corner by the largest window, and it was genuinely beautiful, the wood stripped and refinished to a warm honey color. The metal hardware polished, the surface perfectly level. You did this yourself? I said, running my hand along the edge. Mostly. He stood beside me, close enough that I was very aware of the proximity. The mechanical parts I had helped with. The woodwork I know. It's beautiful. It was a mess when I found it. He touched the corner lightly. The previous owner had painted over the whole thing. 3 layers of paint, and under all of it, this. He gestured at the warm, honey-toned surface. That's the thing about restoration. You don't know what you're going to find until you start removing what was put on top of it. Something in the way he said it made me look at him. He was looking at the table. There was something in his expression that suggested he wasn't entirely talking about furniture. Is that how you think about a lot of things? I asked. He looked at me then. The full attention, no distance. More lately, he said. We stood in the afternoon light by the finished table, and the moment had that particular quality of being suspended, not uncomfortable, but full, like a breath held before something. Can I ask you something? My voice came out steadier than I expected. Yeah, he said. Jade said, she didn't say much, she's not like that. But she said you've been asking about me. Not casually. I looked at him directly. What were you asking? He didn't look away. He was quiet for a moment, but it was a considering quiet, not an evasive one. Who you are when things are hard? He said. What you were like before I knew you. What you want. Pause. Things I wanted to know and didn't have a good reason to ask. Why didn't you have a good reason? Because I wasn't sure you'd want me to. The afternoon light moved across the floor. A car passed outside. I would have, I said. I do. He looked at me for a long moment. Something in his expression shifted, something careful and controlled, giving way to something more honest. I've been trying to figure out how to be around you, he said, without it being obvious that I want to be around you more than makes sense for someone I see at my sister's apartment. It was a little obvious, I said. Something sparked in his eyes. Yeah, the looking, I said. You look at me. Look back, he said. I had no good argument against this, because it was completely true. I didn't know what you were, I started. Gay, he said, without hesitation. If that's what you were trying to figure out, yes. Yes, I said. For the record, he smiled slow, quiet, like it had been waiting. Good, he said. That's good. What followed was not immediate or simple, because we were both people who'd been careful for long, enough that being careless didn't come naturally. We talked for 4 hours that Saturday. About the obvious things first, the history of it. The months of proximity and careful management, the specific work we'd both done to not say what we were saying now, and then past the obvious things into the ones that mattered more. He told me about Portland, about Kieran, the man he'd been with for 3 years, someone he'd loved genuinely who had ultimately wanted a version of Marcus that was tidier, less complicated, less willing to be himself fully. He needed me to be easier, Marcus said. Less opinionated. Less intense. And I tried for a while. And then I stopped being able to. What happened? He left, Marcus said. Or I left. Depending on how you count it. He looked at his hands. The ending was mutual. The damage wasn't. He'd come back to Atlanta not broken, he was clear about that, but reshaped with a clearer sense of himself and a wariness about what he'd let close to him. I didn't want something and then not say it, he said. I'd done enough of that. But he paused. You were Jade's person. You are. I wasn't going to walk into that without knowing where I stood. And now, I said, now I know where I stand, he said. If you do? I told him about my own history briefer. Less dramatic, but with its own particular damage. A relationship in my early 20s that had taught me to associate wanting things with the anticipation of disappointment. A pattern I'd built around keeping myself just slightly out of reach of anything that could really hurt me. I'm very good at the surface level, I said. The deeper stuff I tend to process alone, I've noticed, he said gently. Is it a problem? No, he said. It's something I'd like to know better. If that's something you'd let, that sentence. If that's something you'd let, the care of it, the asking. I said. I'd let that. But before we moved forward in whatever direction forward was going to be, there was Jade. We both knew it without saying it. She was the axis around which both of our lives in Atlanta turned. Whatever this was, it wasn't something that could exist in the margins. It needed to be acknowledged, handled with honesty, and ultimately her blessing, not permission. Because we were adults, and this wasn't a negotiation, but her genuine peace with it, Marcus said. I'll talk to her, and then can I? Would you rather together? I said. We should talk to her together. He looked slightly relieved. In the way that people look when they realize they don't have to do a hard thing alone? Jade. When we showed up at her apartment together on Sunday afternoon with the slightly formal energy of two people who have rehearsed something, looked at us for approximately 3 seconds before sitting down on her couch and saying, "Okay, let's do this." You knew, Marcus said. I knew something, she said. I didn't know it had turned into a Sunday afternoon official conversation situation. She looked at me. You actually talked to him? We talked, I said. At his apartment. At his apartment? She pressed her lips together in a way that was clearly suppressing a smile. Okay, she looked between us. So, what are we doing? Marcus sat in the chair across from her. I sat beside her on the couch, my usual spot, the comfortable one, and we told her the actual version. Not edited, not minimized. Marcus told her what he'd told me about being careful, about not wanting to disturb what was already there. I told her what I'd told him about the pattern of keeping a distance and how it had been getting harder to maintain.